Okay, so the news you heard from the great Monse Bolaños is Darvin Ham's out of a job. And the only person on earth who said, hey, maybe Darvin Ham shouldn't be out of a job was Charles Barkley, which he took the blame off of Darvin Ham and said the Lakers suck. It's not because of Darvin Ham. And my response would be, this can be true. It was a flawed roster. And like we could kind of go back through it if you'd like. But Darvin Ham definitely should accept some sort of blame. The problem with hiring Mike Budenholzer would be he was the one who LeBron trained. Darvin Ham was under. Like he's a longtime Mike Budenholzer assistant. So yes, you're going to get a guy who's won a championship, and yes, you'll get a guy who is much more experienced as a coach. And remember, even when they were in Atlanta, they had the number 1 seed, I believe, in Atlanta one year before being beaten early in the playoffs, and then ultimately was fired and he went to. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. To me, there's very likely to be 2 potential fits. JJ Redick is one. And Ty Lue is the other one. And Ty Lue is probably the favorite. You just got to see what happens if the Clippers lose tonight to the Dallas Mavericks. They lose tonight to the Dallas Mavericks. Does he move on? Does he stay? It's fascinating. Because remember, Ty Lue could have gotten the job when Frank Vogel got the job, only he wanted a 3-year contract. Part of that is the Lakers have always been cheap, but part of that is that he didn't want to do the old bet on himself thing and got a better contract with the Clippers, but has never been able, despite the fact I think he's an outstanding coach, to get out of that second round. But some of this comes down to, and I don't think it comes down to experience. Right? I'm a proponent, I'm a believer, especially in basketball, that, and even in football, I'm just here to tell you, and it's not every player, but there's plenty of players that playing professional basketball, playing for 20 years, you can coach tomorrow. You just need help with the things you don't know. If you haven't put together a practice plan, you got to put together a practice plan. If you got to put together a scouting report, you got to put together a scouting report. But the actual X and O's of a game execution, especially when you're JJ Redick, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. I do understand you learn a lot. I mean, this year, as most people know, I was a consultant for Oklahoma State, and I learned a ton about running a program. I know Mike Boynton lost his job, and now he's at Michigan as assistant coach, and he was amazing to be around. An amazing guy, a thoughtful leader, and I thought as prepared a coach as possible. But there was no part of the in-game coaching that I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing. It's in college basketball, there's a lot of managing different parts, right? You got to manage the academics. You got to manage their bodies. You got to manage their time. You got to manage your time. You got to look at recruiting. You got to do, you got to raise money for NIL. There's lots of different stuff you got to do. In the NBA, it's really just about coaching and managing egos. Coaching and managing egos. And if you've been in a locker room, especially if you weren't the best player, you've had to learn how. It's called a friend of mine, Steve Hers, likes to call it social jujitsu. That makes sense? You just kind of how you move and social jujitsu. You have to have that. You can't survive 15 years in the NBA, especially as a role player, unless you have the ability to have social jujitsu, to move around and use other people's weakness as their strength or other people's strength as their weakness. to understand when you look like you're down, but you're not down. So, look, is JJ arrogant? Hell yeah, he's arrogant. He's a dookie who overachieved after being told he was overdrafted. He wasn't an all-time great player. Doesn't have to be. If there's 450 NBA players, he was one of the best 450 people playing basketball on earth and probably one of the best, 100, 150 for most of his career. Maybe in some years, the best 50 players on the face of the planet. That ain't bad. And as much as I'm not diminishing guys who started coaching at a very young age and have worked their way up. That is experience, an experience gauge, and it is valuable. But you do know that you get the same or better experience receiving that coaching and putting it into play and then sitting there and watching it. The volume of games and reps you've seen is way, way bigger than the volume of game reps you've seen as a coach. And if you think it doesn't work, that's fine. It may not work if they hire him. May not. Right? But the NBA specifically has given us Pat Riley, who didn't want to be the head coach and then took over. We do know Pat Riley was an assistant, but also a broadcaster for the Lakers. Steve Kerr had never coached a day in his life. Now, Fred Hoiberg wasn't a great NBA coach. He's been a great college coach. Part of it was personnel when he's in the NBA. Didn't seem to fit when he's in Chicago. They were trying to figure it out. But Fred Hoiberg went from never coaching a day in his life to being successful at Iowa State. And then he got the Chicago job. Then he got the job at Nebraska in his home area where he grew up, and he took them to the tournament finally. You can go around and around the NBA. Bill Russell was a player coach and won a championship. So it's interesting. Danny Hurley is going to join us in the second hour of the show. And it's not in coaching, but in life, Danny has somebody do something for him. Danny has somebody do something for him that all of us as guys think we should know how to do ourselves. And the point is that the things you don't know how to do, really, really smart people hire people that can do what they can't do. Does that make sense? Like if you don't know how to put together a practice plan, well, then you hire assistant coaches that can put together a practice plan. And then you put together a practice plan and you let your assistant coaches coach. And you slowly kind of fake it until you make it. It's not that big a deal. You've been through and run all of these drills in your life. You've been through practice. You know how your body feels. It's way more important how hard you go and how your body feels. Look, I think Ty Lue is the better option because he's worked with LeBron before. He's coached LeBron before. He's a former Laker as well. He's a longtime assistant, a two-time head coach, and he's won an NBA championship. And while he won an NBA championship, he authored arguably or maybe inarguably the biggest comeback in NBA Finals history. But if you can't get him, I don't see J.J. Redick be a bad option. I just don't. And Darvin Ham isn't out because, Charles Barkley believes the pundits at ESPN thinks he should be out. Darvin Ham was out because nobody could figure out his rotations. I know from a couple of different sources that he's not really he's not a prep guy. He's just not. And the fit has to be along the lines of your best player. And I think LeBron James liked the way he motivated guys, liked the way he gravitated towards the players, liked his fight for his players. But LeBron James is a preparer. He wants to know everything about the other team, and he wants to know everywhere everybody's supposed to be. That's how he rolls. And so when you hire a coach, you don't just hire, and I understand what Rob Pelinka and what Jeannie Buss were looking for. They're like, we went from Frank Vogel, who never played, worked his way up from being a manager at Kentucky, the film room, to being an NBA head coach, kind of a basketball dork, but he had a good relationship with LeBron. Why? Because he's super prepared. And LeBron dug that about him. But you always go the opposite of what you had before. when things go bad, you go, all right, well, you know, it didn't work at the end, so let's hire a guy who's a former player. He'd been around for a championship. He played for the Lakers for a minute. He, size-wise, respect-wise, can look LeBron James in the eye, can look those guys in the eye. I got it. But from very, very early on, I told you it wasn't going to work. And then, of course, there are personnel issues that are undeniable, and it wouldn't have mattered if Red Auerbach, the late, great Red Auerbach, was their coach. If Phil Jackson was coach. Doesn't matter. That team ain't winning a championship. And that does come down to the personnel decisions they made. Some have been the Lakers' own. Some have been pushed by LeBron and Clutch. But to people who say, hey, you don't do what LeBron James would like as head coach, that's great. That sounds great. It doesn't mean you hire Rich Paul as a head coach, but it does mean that you get your best player on board. What's the greatest likelihood of success is LeBron James on board with whatever the guy says. And my guess would be that between Ty Lue and JJ Redick, they can both sit down with LeBron and go, hey, man, look, here's the deal. You want to win one more time? Here's how we're going to do it. Okay, you're going to have to be the third best player at times on the floor. Maybe it takes a little bit less money. You're going to have to trust me. This thing's coming around to you. If you don't have LeBron on board, you don't have a coach. You just don't. So I know there are times in which you'll listen to the show and be like, well, Doug's a LeBron hater. If you listen to me before he won a championship or even early when he won a championship, I would be seen as a guy who's a suck up to LeBron. I'm actually, I feel like the only honest guy here. LeBron he wants to be coached. Okay? Listen, maybe not held as accountable as some other guys, but he wants to be coached. But he wants everybody else to be coached as well. He doesn't want to be the only voice. And my guess is that if the Clippers lose tonight, Ty Lue will be the next head coach of the Lakers. And we could sit here and say, well, the Clippers have a better roster. Well, the Clippers have an owner with deeper pockets. The Clippers are opening a new arena. That's true. You know what they are? They're still the Clippers. Still the Clippers. The Lakers are, I don't know if you guys, like, they're not a sponsor, but this is not a knock on them. Hyundai makes really good cars. Right? Hyundai makes luxury cars as well. I think LeBron has been a spokesman for Hyundai, wasn't he, for a while? The Genesis? But what Hyundai did to get into the luxury market was they kind of undercut the market. You know, their luxury cars were like $5,000 to $10,000 less sticker price. Oh, he did Kia? Same thing with Kia. Kia, Hyundai, same thing. There's nothing wrong with them. They're good cars. Right? But if you roll in with a Mercedes or you roll in with the Kia, people have different thoughts about you, right? So you're LeBron James. You're a gigantic brand. You got one more bite at the apple. It's really unlikely that you can win a championship. But in order to win a championship, he's got to be completely on board, and they have to have a vision that's shared, and somebody else has to want to play with LeBron, AD, and the rest of the Lakers. And you have to have just the right guy and just the right mix. You got to thread that needle tight. And what gives you the best opportunity to do so, I believe, are JJ. I mean, my dear friend Miles Simon would be perfect. He worked for the Lakers, their G League coach. He's worked with LeBron. He ran LeBron's camp. He's an assistant with the Suns. He played. He's a brilliant coach. He just, you know, some of this stuff comes down to your name and your circle of influence and all that other stuff. But I personally believe that Ty Lue should be the choice. And if Ty Lue's not available, then I have no problem with JJ. And the, hey, he's never coached before thing, I get it. I understand it. I'm just telling you the reality of it is NBA guys don't care. You absolutely know who should be in, who should be out. You know, especially when you've been a bench player and a starter, you know about rotations. You know about keeping guys ready. You know about dealing with the egos of stars, all of these things. Right? And it doesn't mean that every guy has to be that guy. Right? Nick Nurse is a tremendous coach. He didn't play in the NBA. He didn't play high-level college basketball. He played ball, didn't play high level. Very good coach. Doc Rivers did. Okay? Billy Donovan played in the NBA. I think he's a very good coach. Mike Malone did not. Mike Malone's dad, Brendan Malone, in the NBA forever. So there is no one way to prepare you for a job or a job of that magnitude. It's you have to have some level of preparation for it. You have to have command and respect of the room. You have to have command and respect of the best player. And then you have to hire people that know what you don't know. If you didn't play, hire a bunch of guys that did play that you can trust, that you can respect, but can relate to the players. If you did play, hire guys that have coached a bunch before to help you out with learning the other things you don't know. And I'm not friends with JJ. I'm not enemies with JJ. I'm not friends with JJ. He's a Dookie. He runs those Dookie circles. Obviously, clearly he's close to LeBron. I played against Ty Lue. I know him a little bit. He's an unbelievable dude. And I personally think he's a fantastic coach. I think Rick Carlisle, by the way, might be the best coach going. I've had NBA coaches tell me they know Rick Carlisle is better than them. And they're just like, we just got to hope coming out of a timeout, they only score once, not twice. But the point is, in order for it to work with the Lakers, that's probably going to have to be how it works.